Salute, we're live. Welcome to the show. The streets are buzzing. CT, got my guy EJ on this one tonight. We're going to get ready to have a great conversation as always with the chat. The replay gang, join in the comments below. EJ fam, how you been? How you feeling?
Feeling real good. Feeling kind of hot. I don't know how it is in Australia, but I would tell you, New York City is so good that it's twice turned over apple pie right now. So other than feeling the heat and not feeling those Miami heat, but feeling good. Good to see everyone. Good to be back. How you feeling, my friend from CT?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. Tonight, Saturday night, it's fight night as well. I thought we'll have a conversation about Knicks takes. What are your hot Knicks takes? What are the takes that you're defending as a Knicks fan, close to your heart, till the end? We'll talk about. We'll get your thoughts and catch up on the latest. But upcoming season, future for the Knicks, bold prediction, safe bets, opponent rivalries, any fight recollections that stick to you as a New York Knicks fan, and are ready to get into it, have some fun. Salute to everyone out here. I know, yeah, you've been on your grind. It's great to have you on and talk with us. The latest is, last night we went on, EJ, the Knicks have, signed a couple of two-ways. They're in the holding pattern now. Looks like they're running it into the season. How are you currently feeling about the Knicks position?
The Knicks position is one where they're clearly, there are lots of things. Obviously, I haven't been on for a while. But there are lots of things that we have to take into consideration with regards to the course of this particular off season. It's first thing is that we know that this front office doesn't necessarily do a lot. It doesn't do a lot of talking at this point within the last 2 or 3 seasons. It's done a lot of more staged MSG press conferences without regular media outlets, and so it's hard to really get a grasp of the direction of the organization. All we have are basically what are the moves, and we have to construct the organizational philosophy via the moves that it makes. Based upon this particular offseason and moves, whether it's trading Obi Toppin and signing Dante DiVincenzo and the two ways, it pretty much appears as if the Knicks are going to try to run it back for this next season, 2023-2024. Which I guess what they're looking at is the lay of the land in the Eastern Conference. And they're saying there wasn't that signature move that they could make that was going to be a difference maker and one that they wanted to make on their own terms. They didn't want to be the Knicks of old, trading away draft picks recklessly. They didn't want to trade for bloated contracts. They didn't want to trade for over the hill superstars or former superstars. They wanted to operate with a measure of control. And so you can't really be upset about that. But it also means that for Knicks fans, you have to kind of temper your expectations. We can't go in and thinking that we're going to win a championship this year. This is yet another building block year where the Knicks are going to try to wait and really deal the best hand that they could possibly deal at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, man. I think they definitely made big attempts to make the bigger move, and the one that sticks out to me is Paul George. We talked about it. Might be the last time you were on with Berman, and Berman went on that epic rant that went viral.
Oh yeah. Did you see my facial reaction during the rant?
Yeah, that was our live reactions. I think was something that actually made that stick out to me as well. I just didn't know what to say.
I love him, man. That's my guy. That's my guy.
He's been more active on Twitter than when he was on the beat. But on a serious note, I think they really did try to look at the Paul George acquisition, thinking this could be a quick 2-year all in run. But I think the extension, Paul George was open to coming to the Knicks, but on the proviso that we re-up him for 220 or something like that, and that may have scared the Knicks away. So, and then we know the Levine situation, and I think we're waiting for a bigger name, Joel Embiid. Just some more rumors today. Another day, another rumor that Philly's under the hot seat. How do you see that situation?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it's true. Like, I think we were closer this year, this off season, to making a bigger move than we were this time last year. This time last year, we were all mired in the Donovan Mitchell conversation. We were all mired in speculation as to whether or not Danny Ainge would really relinquish one of his biggest assets, if not his biggest assets, to reshape and reboot the Utah Jazz. And we went through the histrionics, we went through all of the machinations, we went through all of the different conversations as to why
Yeah,
that deal did not take place. But this year, it seemed as if the Knicks were involved in way more conversations with regards to getting a bigger star. The issue is, though, is that each of the stars that seem to be the focal point of the conversations, the focal points of all the gossips and rumors, they came with some pretty glaring holes and concerns with regards to acquiring them. So Paul George, for example, as much as like many of us we loved Paul George's game, the fear was is that this is Paul George who's now been in the league for quite some time, who has some wear and tear, who's tended to spend more time on the bench than on the court. And yeah, he's going to be up for a contract extension. And that I agree with the Knicks. I agree with the front office. And I know sometimes I get into trouble for agreeing with the front office. It's not a popular move to make. But do you want to pay? I think what Paul George is 32, 33. Do you want to pay him for 4 additional years when the CBA has changed recently and we're seeing more and more onerous contracts that are becoming sort of unwieldy? So one of the things we can compliment our front office about is that the contracts that we have are tradable, are manageable. Even an Evan Fournier contract right now is one that is tradable. I think what the Knicks are trying to do is trying to find the perfect deal
yeah,
for Evan Fournier, which is why we haven't seen him move yet. But it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to make that right move. Zach Levine, he's a really good player. Again, I think that the Knicks are proceeding with caution because obviously there might be some agency issues there, but at the same time, you know, there are tiers of trade targets. There are tiers. I think Zach Levine is a notch below, Joel. I don't think we all know. I don't have to mince words here. We all know that Joel Embiid is top tier NBA players. He's top 10. Zach Levine is more of like your top 20, 25. The same could be said with regards to Paul George. Paul George, 5 years ago, I'm definitely making that trade. Today, I'm not making that trade, especially if he has such strict contract extension demands.
yeah,
And let's not forget too, and before I hand it back to you, CT, and CT made this call this time last year. It might have been a little bit later, but after the introductory press conference with Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland, CT made an observation. I'm not just saying this because he's my friend, but because he was right. He said, take a look at Donovan Mitchell's body language and some of the language he chose to use at that press conference. He was not 100% enthralled with the prospects of being in Cleveland. Mind you, it was a good team, but it wasn't where his heart was set. And that's continued to manifest itself and it's continued throughout the course of this past season into the offseason. And this is why we're starting to hear again more and more chatter about Donovan Mitchell seeming to be his heart is set that he wants to be a New York Knick at some point. So yeah, so I think it might have been wise to hold off on dealing assets that could possibly get you better, more top tier players next offseason.
yep. Man, appreciate you as always. And yeah, welcome in everyone coming in the chat. Welcome in Saturday night. It's Knicks fight night. We're going to give out our takes that we'll defend till the end. Um, bold predictions, safe bets. But yeah, on that note, EJ, I think the Knicks are open. What I gathered is they're trying. Right, I want to see a front office that's trying to make that move, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be upset if they don't make it because we got to look at the other side. For the Knicks to do a deal, it requires another team, right? And what does that other team want? Right? Some people identify a player that they like and they assume let's just get it done, but they don't know what the other team is wanting back. And from Danny Ainge to you know um, the guy out in New Orleans, the Pelicans guy
David Griffin, I think.
David Griffin, Masai Ujiri. I mean, they have been all notoriously difficult to deal with. Daryl Morey's another one. I'm assuming Portland can't get a trade done. He can't get a trade done with the Clippers. Like, it's not like the NBA is doing a whole lot of transactions at the moment. A lot of teams are trying to figure out, maybe come into the season and hope, cross their fingers, hope, pray to God that they're better than what they really are, than the sum of their parts. I think Chicago is another one that's very difficult to deal with. And meanwhile, the New York Knicks, probably Leon Rose doesn't feel like he's under as much pressure because we run it back and we're still a top 4, top 3 seed, in my opinion, with potential for younger players to take that next leap. But as I really want to see the front office trying to make that move, and the Paul George conversation report was confirmation that we were trying to make that upgrade, that it just did not make sense at this current point. Anything that you have to add?
I think a lot of our conversation can just be on that one point. Um, a lot of us have become spoiled as basketball fans because we only think of our team. Many of us, not all of us, but many of us, when we're thinking about consummating trades or engaging in trades, we forget that there are politics to this business. There are politics to relationships between front offices. There are some front offices that you'll notice that don't have a problem making a deal with other teams because of the backstage, behind the scenes politics. So, for example, one of the things that frustrated me in Knicks content world is many of us only looked at Leon Rose. We only looked at the Knicks organization and their ability to get Donovan Mitchell last year. And many of us really weren't being fair in looking at, well, did Danny Ainge even want to trade Donovan Mitchell to the New York Knicks? What were there some backstage politics? Were there some backstage aspects of this that we weren't privy to? Because Danny Ainge was under no obligation, no responsibility to trade Donovan Mitchell to the New York Knicks. And neither was he responsible for trading Donovan Mitchell to the New York Knicks for our worst assets. And so, like, that's the part of it when we look at the business of basketball and we look at the content creation space. It's sometimes something that is missed in the larger conversation, that these GMs and these presidents of basketball operations, they sometimes have such a political atmosphere where they may not want to make a deal. Or here's another thing too, in the world of content creation, since the last 3 or 4 years, where the Knicks have 20, 30 different YouTube spaces dedicated to micro analyzing every single move the front office makes. The Heat have a space. The Boston Celtics have spaces. Portland has, I'm assuming Portland has a, Trailblazers blazing. I don't know. But in a world where now everyone is on YouTube, everyone is on Twitter, and your job is now in the center of these content storms, that also adds to making these deals being more difficult to actually execute. And so not only is it the personality of a Danny Ainge, not only is it like the hubris sometimes of a Masai Ujiri thinking that he's going to fleece the Knicks again after the Andrea Bargnani trade, it's also the pressure that exists now in terms of content creators, in terms of rabid fans. Guys, the fandom now is different than what it was 20 years ago. The amount of coverage that exists today is very different than what existed in 94 or 99. It's a very different landscape.
Yeah.
And I also think that adds to the pressure in terms of making deals. And yeah, I agree with you guys. Let's not also just talk about like the politics between, agents and agencies like CAA and Clutch. Like, that's on a whole different level than what it was 20 years ago. We were just talking about David Falk, the super agent, Michael Jordan's agent and Patrick Ewing's agent. It's a different landscape. And so that's why trading today is just more difficult, it seems.
Yeah, my overall perspective on it is, when you're doing a big deal, there's so many layers to it. the player you're bringing in, what you're giving out, the fit of the new player coming in. And I want to give 3 examples of teams that made big moves last off-season and it didn't work out. Your favorite one. What's going to be number one?
Rudy, go there.
Number one coming in, weighing in at 255 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Number two, I'll get your thoughts. I'll give the three. Atlanta. What were the Knicks criticized for not getting in
DeJounte
on?
Murray. Yep.
DeJounte Murray. Yep. And then what was another rushed panic move because they had to do something? James Harden
Yeah.
getting brought into Philly was never
Yeah.
really a quality fit. They just had to get rid of Ben Simmons and they had to make that move. So that's 3 pretty big moves that you would think on paper that team's making an upgrade, making an addition, but in fact it didn't end up actually being an addition. Ended up being something that didn't help the team at all. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I'm someone who's been lobbying for the Knicks to try to force that next upgrade as well, like an OG, who I think is a different kind of thing, a great fit, but they want too much.
Well, yeah. Also, like, let's look at some of like, I mean, the James part of it also too is like you're looking at some. We can go back a couple of seasons. Let's go back to like the summer of KD and Kyrie. I
Yeah.
mean, when we dissect the summer of Kyrie and KD, would you want to? I mean, because that could have been us, guys. Like, let's actually take a step back and be objective and engage in the history. That could have been us. And all things being equal, what would we have gotten from that? Because, assuming like we don't even make the James Harden deal like Brooklyn did, KD and Kyrie, less than 4 years later, gone. And what did the Brooklyn Nets have to show for it? Mikal Bridges, a really nice player, but from where they were and all of the hullabaloo in terms of like what the prospects of Brooklyn taking over New York City, I'm not saying they ever would have, but that was the conversation. It's trades are way more complicated than 2K. And guys, I love 2K, but or it's better. It's more difficult than the trade engines on ESPN. And I know a lot of our off-season conversation, because we're content creators, it's about the hypothetical trades. There's a sensationalism that exists in terms of ever since LeBron's decision in 2010, ESPN has ratcheted up the melodrama, and I use that intentionally, by the way, the melodrama associated with the NBA offseason because it's profitable. I mean, go back and check the ratings for ESPN, ABC's The Decision, the fact that they made that into a television show. And ever since then, there's been a melodrama, there's been television shows. I mean, guys, ESPN has dedicated time on its network to really engaging basketball fans in the offseason. Why? Well, because baseball coverage during the offseason, which is where it happens to coincide with the NBA offseason, it's not sexy enough. So you need to seduce fans into watching content. It's great, but then when you actually get into the minutia, into the trades, they're very difficult because you're dealing with people who are not necessarily obligated to want to trade to your team simply because you want them there.
Yeah. Yeah, and every deal is a leverage move because what do other teams GMs look at the Knicks like? Oh, they need to make their next big move. Do I want to be that person that helps them? I don't know. Especially with the way we're operating now with connections with our agency, our closer circle, operating with more confidence. And I really feel like the Knicks to get that next step is we're looking at the players on screen. Um, in terms of most likely we're going to have another star on the team that when we win our next championship.
Yeah.
Right? I still feel like
Yeah.
we need that next star, but that doesn't mean we can't get to contention. We can't get to the ECF with the players on screen. We talked just before coming on my power rankings, fam, with the East at the moment. I've got the
Mhm.
Bucks, the Celtics, with some asterisks on KP's health and a point guard,
Yeah.
and then the Knicks coming in at 3. Um, as of power rankings today, there's too much in flux with Philly. If they lose Harden, they're not bringing in another star. It's going to be Norm Powell, Mook Morris, and Trey Mann and draft picks. So did they get worse? They lost Georges Niang, Shake Milton. And then Miami, if they get Damian Lillard, yeah, they could probably bump up to number 3, 2. But they're going to lose Hero, Strauss, Vincent, maybe Caleb Martin. So yeah, how do you see that playing out with the Knicks coming back and across the East?
The East is in a really well. The word is parity. The word is definitely parity. There's a lot of parity in the league
Mm,
overall, and there's especially a
yeah,
lot of parity in the East. The West is going to be dominated by Denver. Again, like who would have thought last year this time that Denver would have been what it was this past season? But the East, though, like we called it last year. We said like last year, the East can go any way. And like, my man CT, he I think he predicted last year 44, 45 wins for the Knicks. And I was like, bro, they're gonna be battling for the play-in. But in part, the reason why is because the East, and we both did get this right. We both did say that there were teams that people were not looking at accurately. Like we talked about, for example, Chicago.
yep,
Chicago was a team that, if you look back 2 seasons with Lonzo Ball, with DeMar DeRozan, people were projecting them to replicate that production. And unfortunately, because of Lonzo Ball's injury and a number of other factors, they haven't been able to do that again. Um, and again, like the East is like every team that's at the top tier of the Eastern Conference, they have a player that if you look at them closely enough, you're like, yeah, there's a chance that guy is not going to replicate the production that people are estimating him to have. So, for example, with the Bucks, it's always for me Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton is always that player. Like if you just take a look at his season, there's always
yep,
a chance he's going to miss 10, 15, 20 games, and because of that, the Bucks are not going to maximize their potential for that particular season. Um, with regards to Boston, now that guy's KP. We all guys, we know KP. We as Knicks fans, we know KP. We know that
Boston's
there's
going to know him soon.
oh yeah, Boston's gonna know him, and Boston will not be kind. And then the player in Philadelphia is James Harden. Listen, even if James Harden is still in Philly, even if James Harden, opening game night, first game of the season, first night of the season, even if James Harden is still in Philadelphia, Philly's going to take a precipitous fall back. Why? Because James Harden is still in Philadelphia. And we know that when James Harden is unhappy somewhere, if he's still there, he won't be there. James Harden is a magician. He has the ability to be somewhere and not be there
Yep,
at the same time.
yeah.
So could the Knicks make develop and ascend through the Eastern Conference simply by there being players who don't meet the back of their basketball cards? Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, we wait to see. But one thing at one point I want to make is again, I really feel like the Knicks need to capitalize on Jalen Brunson's prime. Um, I'm not someone who really wants to waste years, but um, the point I'll make is there's steps to this, right? Did Denver just come out of nowhere and win the chip the past year, or did they have a few years of injuries, underachieving, flaming out earlier in the playoffs, etc.? You got to make the playoffs first, and every single team that wins the championship will have had a few years prior where they've gone out earlier in the playoffs, right? There's that metaphor, you got to stand before you can walk. You got to crawl before you can stand. You got to jog before you can run. You got to run before you can sprint. So I think, you know, the future will tell us, are we still, is this the early setting of the Knicks run at a championship, or will we go backwards? Only time will tell. But in terms of my patience level, it's teetering at 6, I would say, 6 or 7. But I do think at the end of the next 12 months, um, you know, I feel like the Knicks will have another star in. Um, but at the same time, if Barrett, Grimes, and we'll start to get into our safe bets, bold predictions, I think someone on this team will take another leap. But Quickly's contract's coming up. We brought in DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. I think they were here to brought in EJ to make up for the possible consolidation trade coming up in the future. But we'll see. This season's going to be fascinating, man. Every season got a mind of its own again. As we'll continue to talk about which teams we think could fall and slide in future episodes, I want to make this one tonight about, which takes are you defending till the end, past or present, and also safe bets for the season and any bold predictions you have for the season. Let us kick start right with some safe bets, bold predictions. And then we'll continue to shout people out for the Knicks takes that they'll defend till the end as we gear up for the big fight tonight between the generational fight between Spence and Crawford. Give us your thoughts on who you think is going to win. You might be a boxing diehard aficionado or just a casual fight fan, but let us know. We'd love to hear it. I'll start with a couple of safe bets from me. We'll go back and forth. But I think this is looking like it's going to happen, and it's the IQ extension, Josh Hart extension, August and October. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we talked about this last off season. We talked about how this year, or last year into this year, both years, would be important in terms of consolidation. And because we definitely had that conversation. We talked about how, well, they're going to have to figure out what to do with Obi Toppin. They're going to have to figure out what to do with Emmanuel quickly. Obviously, this time last year, we didn't know that there'd be a Josh Hart component to this. But part of the reason why I do agree with you that there's going to be an IQ extension is because IQ's a good player. IQ's a really good player. IQ is also a player you're going to need around. And I'm not saying I want to do this, but in case you have to consolidate talent and contracts to be able to get that bigger contract, that bigger player. And so, we're going to start to, I agree with you. I think that, without saying too much, I do think that we're going to see an extension with Josh Hart. Obviously, I think that's like that was an under the table agreement. Like, hey, we got you. Just make sure, especially because you want to re-sign Josh Hart, not just because he's a dog, not just because of what he does in terms of the work and effort, but because you also want to make Jalen Brunson happy. We all saw the video in terms of how excited he was when when we traded for Josh Hart. So I definitely agree. My safe bet is Jalen Brunson is going to be an all-star.
Yes.
He's going to be an all-star. That's a safe bet. I think that a lot of basketball fans, a lot of basketball writers, prognosticators, people in the basketball media world, they knew that Jalen Brunson was a good player. I do think, though, that unfortunately they didn't recognize how good he was. I did not recognize how good he was, in part because he played next to Luka Doncic. And I think that for some, Jalen Brunson's stats were a function of what he did, whether rightly or wrongly, and we now know that this was wrong. People perceived it as being a function of just playing next to Luka Doncic or the Luka effect. I think that there was a great clip on Twitter where this guy thought that Jalen Brunson was going to be the biggest bust last season, and that was so proven wrong. And to his credit, he did say that he was wrong. But I think that last season was really an awakening for much of the basketball world as to who Jalen Brunson is. And I think that part of it also, too, was that he was disrespected in terms of the All-Star vote. And there's going to be a way in which he's going to find his way onto the NBA Eastern Conference All-Stars this year.
Yeah, nice. Yep. You took that one from me, but I'm glad you mentioned it too. Because that's a safe bet.
Oh, yeah.
But, hey, the East is stacked. Coming up now, but Tyrese Halliburton the fake All-Star, those two might be vying for a spot. Um, with that said, but yeah, we got one with JB. What can we say? I mean, the first season of him as a New York Knick blew me away, and no doubt, I think like the organization, some people feel internally, man, is that the talk is they feel like he's got another level he could show us.
Yeah.
Could he really be a 1A, a scorer on a team? Maybe not the best all round player, but maybe a 1B, 1A player coming up. So that's great. Yep, completely agree. Um, Another safe bet I've got, which is no surprise compared to my power rankings, I think the safe bet is that the Knicks will be a top 5 seed once again. But with a bold prediction, is that I could see a world where we're a top 2, top 3 seed based on other teams' regression and based on a slight improvement on us, let's say having Josh Hart for the whole year, Dante DiVincenzo. I think people are sweeping under the rug what he might bring as well. But we won't really know how much other teams do slide. But I think there's enough potential improvement that the Knicks, as a bold prediction, could be top 3. Let's have it.
No, listen,
Yeah.
I can't say anything because last year you were the one who, when Berman and I were like, nah, there's no way they're gonna be playing teams. You were like, no, they're gonna win about 45. You were the more confident one, and you were one out of the three of us who was right. So like my hesitation is because I tend to go conservative in terms of like predictions. But I agree with you. I think the East is ripe for a team to be a surprise team. And like as much, here's my only issue though, is I don't want to take too much away from Miami. Even though Miami is primed to make whatever incarnation or whatever variation of this Dame deal, Miami is always surprising people. And so like I don't want to be the one to just simply say, um, what's up, Buzzer? I don't want to be the one to say like discount Miami, but at the same time, Miami is not necessarily been the best regular season team. So with that said, I totally agree with you. I think that the Knicks can be a top 4 team.
Yeah.
I
That's why I
totally
said
agree
it's a
with you.
bold prediction. It's
It
not
is bold.
necessarily. It's not like I'm putting all my money that it's going to happen. That's what the safe bet is for. I'm trying to foreshadow. Hey, if things
Yeah,
break
go
right,
right. Yeah.
this is what I could see happening. But yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. My bold will be 3.
Yeah,
My bold will be 3. My bold will be because here's the thing too, like Milwaukee's in a those top 3 teams are all you can find ways where they're not going to be as good as last season.
yeah,
You could easily find a way to argue that they're not going to be as good. Like for example, Boston, that Porzingis. That's all I have to say.
yeah.
That's all I have to say. Philadelphia, James Harden. No matter what, and I said this to CT when we were chopping it up offline. Philly is this year's Brooklyn. Let's just put it this way. This year's Philly will be last year's Brooklyn. So,
Yeah.
like it's to me like Philadelphia. Like the process has been processed and it's in the can. That was
You know,
bars hopefully.
I'll share a confession with you all, and
Yeah.
based on the second last show, I think when I revealed my power rankings, that's how irrelevant Brooklyn are to me. I left them out of my top 10. Forgot about them when doing
Wow.
my top 10 East power rankings at the moment. I left Brook
Wow.
I left Brooklyn out. That's
Wow.
that's how irrelevant they are. They're not even in the news about like their team is what is it? Like they might get Tyler Hero, they might not. They've got like 5 wings. Like
Wow.
they've got Ben Simmons, who they're hyping up, is supposedly looking like he's in LSU shape, which someone's carrying water for him. Why I don't know why I constantly see reports saying expect to see the LSU Ben Simmons again. I mean, anyone who's had a back issue before in their life knows knows to tread carefully.
Ben Simmons, especially in the New York area for Knicks fans, Ben Simmons should be Kerry exactly took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to say Dennis Smith Jr. Um, Brooklyn again. I said this earlier, and I'm not going to re-harp on this, but Ben Simmons is a cautionary tale of when trades go wrong.
Yeah,
Brooklyn is a cautionary tale of not just rushing to just buy. Like, we can't Amazon this, guys. We can't Amazon the organization. Like, we can't just, like, see something nice and say, all right, I'm going to prime it. I'm going to prime a Zach Levine. I'm going to prime a Paul George, because you end up in a situation like Brooklyn where you have a Ben Simmons. But has anyone in basketball history had that much of a value decline in 2 seasons in the prime of their career? It's such a bizarre
crazy.
situation. So yeah, I don't blame you for having forgotten them, because
Yeah,
that is not a good situation there.
yeah. They're there on the edge between 8th and 10th, I would feel. But I really feel the story was I feel like Indiana and Orlando are on the come up, and I really think they've got a better team than Brooklyn do. Um, but what else do we got? In terms of other safe bets, bold predictions, anything else
Yeah,
that's
I have
coming to
one.
your mind? Yeah,
I have a bold one. Uh, Obi Toppin will average 13 points this upcoming season.
13 points.
Yep.
That's very specific. Do you feel like he's going to win the battle against their rookie, Jarace Walker, or win the coach Carlisle over, another tough veteran coach?
I think that I think he will win that battle, simply because he's an older
Yep.
player, and he's an older player who's shown, knock on wood, the potential to have maturity in a younger locker room. So I think that he'll get some minutes, and I think that he'll have the opportunity to have perhaps the best season of his career. I'm not saying that he'll be an all-star or anything, any of he'll just simply have more runway to put up some numbers. I don't think
Yep.
the numbers will be all world, all star, all NBA, but I think that he'll be serviceable enough that he'll get enough minutes to really
Yeah.
display that he's a player in the league.
Yeah, he'll help them ascend to maybe a play-in spot, or
Yeah,
they're ready to win now. I think Indy's
yeah,
going to make some noise.
I think
But
so
yeah,
too.
Obi, great point. Obi Hive stand up, because
Yeah,
you've been a little critical of Obi, I think, at times.
yeah.
In terms of, I wonder what you feel like his ceiling could be. Um, one of the takes, uh, I'll just throw in a take that I'll defend to the end, is that in an alternate universe, I feel like Obi could have been our starting power forward. Um, I think he was old enough. I think coming in, consistency in minutes and reps are everything. And if, as a player, if you're preparing every day to be that starter, to be that player, we eventually start to see the best of you, the best version of Obi. I feel like could have been a starting power forward. Uh, not necessarily saying all star, but I'll defend the fact that I feel like Obi can be a starting power forward in the league. I think we've seen some games where he's done enough. Ultimately, just the wrong coach, wrong location, wrong time, wrong coach. Not a not a
Absolutely.
defensive, um, not a defensive minded power forward. Um, but yeah, in terms of that draft though, is there any take that you'll defend in terms of who the Knicks should have taken at the time? Could you remember thinking who did you want the Knicks to select?
So this is the Obi draft.
Yeah.
The Obi draft was difficult. Um, so what did we we
Is it?
we we
I
chose
wanted us to
eighth.
look at Devin Vassell, one of the wings. Um, Halliburton, I had concerns over. I know how much we needed a guard, but yeah, I was really looking at one of those wings. But then Obi popped up.
Yeah, Obi, that draft was so Obi's what now going into his fourth year.
Yeah,
So that would have been 2018, 2019, I believe, was his first season. See, the issue is that that draft was complicated because how many cornerstone, actually, I won't
yeah,
even say cornerstone, how many 1 through 8, like clear 1 through 8 players did we have starting that 2018, 2019 season? And that's what made that draft so difficult is that you're drafting, and I know obviously nowadays the Therese Halliburton, that's the easy choice. Like that's the easy choice
yeah,
we should have made. But
yep. It's at the time.
it's at the time you have to look at it. Like so honestly, like we could have gone in a number of different directions in retrospect because how many of those players from 2018, 2019 are still on the roster? And that says a lot because there were so many holes in the roster at that particular point that Devin Vassell, um, you know, Tyrese Halliburton. In another world, yeah, you're right. It could have been Obi. I think Obi's a player that, like, in another two, I'll say this about Obi, and I have been critical of Obi. I think part of the issue with Obi's game has been, you're right, wrong coach.
Yep.
Like if Obi had a, what's his name? Former Brooklyn coach, spent time with Golden State,
Kenny Atkinson.
Kenny Atkinson. That's a kind of coach, considering what he did in Brooklyn, that you see a little bit
Oh
more
yeah,
maturation possibly in Obi's game. Because Obi's one of those players who he really operates well when he has the confidence of the coach. Like I said, throughout the course of last season, Obi, you could see it. You could see it. It was palpable. This idea of Obi was trying to do as much as possible in the game to demonstrate that he belonged as part of the 1 through 8, 1 through 9 roster. I think that will happen in Indiana because they'll have more time. You'll see more of a maturation in his game. The other thing too that you'll see
yeah,
is I think that once he starts to put on a little bit more man weight, like that difference between being like that young kid, like that young adult, and he starts to
yeah,
put on a little bit more of like, okay, like I'm now solidly like when you look at Julius Randle, for example, Julius Randle has hit that point in his life where he's like, okay, clearly defined, like he's a strong four.
yeah,
He might be a little bit
yeah,
undersized for a four, but he has the weight of a man. You've seen this with Giannis. Like Giannis, he's gained 30, 35 pounds since the time he was drafted. I think
yeah,
that will help to define more of Obi's role within the next 2 or 3 seasons. But I also think that if we look at Franklin Lakina, Kevin Knox, Obi, I think of the three of them, Obi will be in the league far longer than Kevin Knox or Franklin Lakina.
yeah. Definitely. Yeah, excellent skill set. I think when featured, you will see the best of Obi. The Knicks were a heavy isolation player. Brunson, Randall, Barrett. With Indy, they don't really have that go-to kind of isolation guy. They're going to play fast.
Yeah.
Halliburton up, already looking forward to those lobs. And we've seen so many players over the course of the NBA. When you're featured, your numbers, you could look like a stud. We've seen Trey Burke look like the second coming of AI. Remember there was that
Mhm.
meme? We had AI version 2.0 with Trey
Yeah, I
Burke
remember that. Yeah.
going off for that 30-point tear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no one really expected Julius Randle to be a go-to isolation NBA All-Star when he was 23, 24, 25 maybe. There's still doubters on Julius Randle
Absolutely.
right now. So I really think Obi's going to shine in Indiana. I think he's not an all-star, but I think, at his best, and I think in a different universe, if we had featured him from the beginning, I think he could have been NBA starting on a good team. Um, Knicks takes will defend till the end. Um,
Obi.
eh, uh, hey, going back a little bit to my earlier fandom days, 1997 New York Knicks versus Heat. Whoa. Let me bring it back to more currently first before we
Yeah.
hit that. The Knicks. I think the Knicks beat the Miami Heat last past season with health. Um, I mean, I still feel like we were the better regular season team. Obviously, we had depth, but we just didn't have experience. But
Hmm.
with health, we don't really know how banged up Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle really were. I mean, anyone who's played ball on one ankle can attest to this. But you can't really do what you need to do. You know, do do you really think the Knicks would have beaten the Heat? Could you have seen another way the Knicks could have beaten the Heat, or do you just think the best team won that?
I definitely think. I mean, I made the allusion to this before, like during the playoffs, that we didn't know how injured Julius Randle was. Um, obviously, I
Mm.
don't have sources or anything of that nature, but it was apparent. Like he was more injured than what the Knicks let on because the Knicks don't have press conferences. They don't disclose any
Yeah,
information. Um, but it was apparent that he was really injured. And so if Julius Randle is your one B right now, or your one A, whichever however you want to label him, and he's on a compromised ankle, and his game is largely spot up, shoot, and ISO, he's compromised. And the same thing in terms of Jalen Brunson. Like, Jalen Brunson was extremely compromised. Um, do they win the series if Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle are reasonably healthy for what stars of a team should be at the end of a long season and into the second round of the playoffs? I think they have a better showing. I definitely think they have a better showing. I think they have a stronger showing. Let's not also forget Emmanuel quickly. I think, now that I think about it, like Emmanuel quickly being injured, uh, Julius Randle being injured, and Jalen Brunson being injured, those were really those are really difficult injuries. At the same time, though, Miami was able to produce some players that
yeah,
played really well,
took us by surprise.
and they got paid for it. They got paid for
Yeah,
Miami got Gabe Vincent, and I'm saying this respectfully because to make it to the NBA is a very difficult task, and that's because of the work that a player puts in. But Miami helped to get Gabe Vincent paid.
oh, facts.
Miami
No
helped to
one.
get Max Strus paid, like this
Yeah.
season, this offseason.
What about these two veterans that there was a budding joke about Kyle Lowry throughout the season? It was like, should they just waive him?
Hmm.
He ended up helping them get to the finals. Kevin Love was on the scrap heap. Uh, Cleveland, a team who we washed in 5 games, said basically, "Here, we have no use for you, Kevin Love.
Yeah,
Go do whatever your heart desires, and I'm going to show you." I go on the Miami Heat. I don't know if it's coaching, I don't know if it's motivation, but that's why I think, yeah, players, you know, can look better on another team, simply with another fit. But yeah, Kevin Love, Kyle Lowry, man, those guys took me by the biggest surprise.
yeah, absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
Let's give a shout out to our boy Parish Duggar. Is that a super chat?
Yes, sir. Salute.
So Obi isn't a point getter. He's an exclamation point getter. That's a very part of the important point. Sorry, that's a very important part of the entertainment for the NBA, teammates, and for national TV. Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like, the NBA ever since the days of David Stern has been about selling stars, and not that Obi is going to be a superstar. I don't foresee that. I hope he does really well in his career. But one of the things that the Knicks even realized, there was a reason why if you go to Madison Square Garden, if you watch MSG, he was part of all the highlight packages because he was able to do things that certain other players couldn't do. But I do think
Yeah.
that in terms of takes, Obi's just one of those players who will go down in Knicks history as you were either for him, you were against him, you didn't believe in him, or you believed in him. He'll always just be one of those players. He'll just go down in the history of the pantheon of Knicks players that could have been, should have been debates.
Yeah. There was just such a small sample size of him being an NBA starter. Like,
Yeah,
there was that small run towards the end of a season, and it was like scattered minutes all over the place. I don't know. But yeah, it's going to be a hot topic. We look forward to seeing him succeed. I do anyway.
Me
I
too.
don't hold
Yeah.
any grudges. It's just we're all aboard the Tibbs train right now. It's get Tibbs, guys, as long as he's here, and see if it works. If it
Yeah.
doesn't, we know he's going to be on the next thing smoking. Um, uh, yeah, in terms of going back, man, the 1997 Knicks Heat, right? Between the Patrick Ewing um, situation those years, the Knicks got awfully close, right? If Patrick Ewing had a little more help, he would have had multiple rings.
Yeah.
Is another take I'll die on forever defending. Patrick Ewing didn't have a lot of help, man. We relied on a crazy ascendance of John Starks, another player who was on the scrap heap, come up and
Yeah.
rise up. Um, and I think the Knicks would have had multiple rings. Rolando Blackman should have been played. Um, hate to dig up some old wounds,
It really hurts,
but
man, because I remember that series really well in '94. Yeah.
yep. And the '97 thing, the NBA, the suspensions,
Yeah.
that
Really.
may have been the Knicks' best year. Probably was the Knicks' best year. We were in incredible form in that, right? Um, it pains me to this day that I don't have one championship since I've been alive. But those are the years I look at as like, man, Patrick Ewing should have had one ring at least, you know?
I'll do this. I'll say this. I'll propose this particular take. Um, who because this is the unparalleled, like this is the unquestioned truth. Is that the Knicks have had in the past 30 years two preeminent talents in the organization. They've had
Mm,
Patrick Ewing, which actually this point is now 35 years ago, and they had Carmelo Anthony. So we could have a debate: which front office did worse by the preeminent talent? Was it
oh,
the Carmelo front office or the Patrick Ewing front office? So which front office did worse by the
that's tough,
superstar?
man.
It really is a tough question because if you think about it, the 90s Knicks, even though they didn't win the chip, they were constantly in playoff contention. But you could also argue, though, could they have made a
Yeah,
move short of 94, 95, where Jordan was out of the league?
yeah, they had a long
Was there
time.
a move that could be made that could overcome Michael Jordan? Because when Michael Jordan was in his
Yeah,
prime, there's nothing. It felt like there was nothing people could do. But at the same time, Melo, although LeBron was at the height of his superpower LeBronness with the Heatles, there were some times like it kind of felt like the Knicks made moves that undermined the best they could have gotten out of Melo. So, for example, when they had a chance to amnesty a player, they chose the wrong
mm.
player. So,
Talk about
so which
list
one
of
is it?
takes that I'll die on defending on forever. That was a major F up. But I think the Knicks purposely, and I think I've said this many times actually, the Knicks, there's been credible reports that Dolan was consulted and Dolan didn't want to waive amnesty Amari. He was because he was the prize signing to say, hey, I'm gonna bring the Knicks back. The Knicks are back. So for that petty reason or however you want to describe it, Dolan did not want to amnesty Amari. And the fact that Tyson Chandler became available was so enticing. They thought, let's just do this right now. Let's waive Billups, get Tyson Chandler in here. You know, and Tyson had a very controversial Knicks tenure. You know, was owned in the playoffs against Indiana. Was always
Yeah.
sick, but won a Defensive Player of the Year. So you could argue he came in and did what he was signed to do. You could maybe argue Tyson Chandler didn't deliver. Um, but the chat saying Carmelo, the Carmelo front office, I got to agree. Um,
I
what do you What do you think? Because I think the argument for the other one, I'll say, is that Patrick Ewing was so good for so long. They had a
Yes.
long, they had a longer period of time to find him somebody. And I even heard reports that the Knicks had a trade for James Worthy,
Yeah.
possibly as well. And we don't know. Maybe there were some trades that eventually weren't done. But another Carmelo argument is Kyle Lowry. They almost got Kyle Lowry for Shumpert and a first round pick. And they end up giving a first round pick for Andrea Bargnani.
That's the one. That's the one. But here's okay.
It was worst trade in maybe Knicks history. Is that a take you would defend to the end? Andrea Bargnani? What's been a worse trade?
I always go back to Howard Isley and Shandon Anderson. Um,
Yeah.
I go
Eddie
back.
Curry?
Eddie Curry was a really bad trade. I go back to trading Patrick Ewing, and so here's why I go back to like the '90s and not helping Patrick Ewing get um, that running mate that he needed. And although some people have mentioned, like, for example, they eventually did get Allen Houston, they eventually
Yeah.
did get Latrell Sprewell, but that was at the end of Patrick's career. Like,
Yeah.
really, at that point, when they got Allen Houston, I think they got Allen Houston in '96. Um, that was Patrick's like 11th or 12th season. Latrell Sprewell, I think, is like that's later on. So like he's no longer the same player. At that point, you're now contending with um,
Yeah.
the Shaquille O'Neals of the world. I mean, like Shaquille O'Neal
Was
in '96, like this is when,
Hakeem's.
yeah, Hakeem, you know, so
David Robinson.
yeah,
It
there.
was just
So and Tim Duncan is right around the corner. So the reason why I have to come back to be objective for us to look at both sides is the end of Patrick Ewing's tenure is 2001. So it's then that we see the Knicks go into a free fall as an organization where for like 10 plus years, you have horrible player after horrible player, horrible acquisition after horrible acquisition. And so you can ask the question, if they had actually gotten the proper running mate for Ewing in the 1990s, do we go into that free fall that occurs into the 2000s where basically 2000s New York Knicks basketball was unwatchable. It was
oh,
really like Luke Longley. Whew, it was really bad.
I think you made the point. Isaiah Thomas made a transaction like basically what's seen daily. Like those were the years. I admit I wasn't following each game as religiously as I was prior and after. But every day I logged on the internet or I looked at the news, it just seemed like the Knicks had made a transaction today.
Yeah. Well, because it was bad. It was really, I mean, the Larry Brown year, Stephon Marbury and Steve Francis, like those, like
Yeah,
we can't, like, so that's why, like, I know I don't want to be engaged too much of recency bias. I do see that there's some level of like how you can make the Melo argument, but at the same time, like the effects of the Ewing era ending so badly, we can't forget what it led. Like, I wasn't watching games as religiously after Ewing because it was just so bad. It was really, really bad after Ewing.
yeah, yeah. I'm just making the case for both, but I think Melo was the worst front offices, of course. But you could make the point that the front office didn't capitalize on Ewing's timeline as much as the other. You know, Carmelo did have Tyson Chandler, Amari Stoudemire, obviously health again. Uh, Kerry brought up the intersecting timelines of Bernard King and
Yeah,
Patrick Ewing.
yeah.
Um,
Just
what
this
what
missed it by
ultimately
this
happened
much.
there? Was it Bernard's knees gave out just before, or kind of yeah
Yeah, Bernard King's knee gave out right before then, and then he was traded. So Patrick Ewing and Bernard King never played together. And like that's really like when you look at the history of Patrick Ewing, what's really crazy is that first off, I think he's underappreciated in for many Knicks fans. Um, and also like what makes his career so damn difficult is that he's always missed a player by that much. So
Yeah.
he missed Bernard King's career by that much. Mark Jackson, well, 30 years set us up for now. So Mark Jackson's career, right? It's like we let go of Mark Jackson a little bit too quickly. When you look at some of like the other moves that came around like the Ewing era, they never quite were able to get that person. And so like by 94, when we had a chance at the chip, you know, we were a couple of pieces away from getting that championship. And so you know, like let's go back to Charles Smith, for example. Like that 4 attempts to put back a basket. You know, so it's those, like if you're of a certain age, we were in not only in the playoffs, but we were in the finals. Like we were very close to being in the finals. So those are like those little moves when you think about it. Like, are we sitting here having a conversation about like we haven't seen a championship since 1973? If like there's one player that you acquire, you know, in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, again, thanks for everyone for rocking along Saturday night. It's Knicks fight night. We're defending our most agreeable Knicks takes. One I'll say is that Isaiah Thomas, for me, seemed to be the worst executive we've had. Close. I mean, what would you say, Phil Jackson?
Phil Jackson.
Would you say Phil Jackson over
Phil Jackson.
Isaiah?
Phil, definitely.
Yep.
Definitely Phil Jackson. Okay. Here's what I'll say.
His legacy was tied to quite maybe one move. Let's say he was given permission to trade KP before and got us back Devin Booker or Jaylen Brown for KP, and then was let go. Would people be looking at Phil Jackson differently? Because sure as hell our future would look differently.
Actually, you know what? You can even throw Scott Layden in there. So here's why I'll say it was Phil Jackson. Every decision Phil Jackson made was based upon the triangle offense.
Yeah, that was tough. Ron Baker, Jimmer Fredette. I mean, we could go down the line of players he brought in.
Hiring coaches.
Lou Amundsen.
Oh my gosh, man.
Signing dudes from the YMCA.
But if you think about it, like, you know, like the fact that we had Jeff Hornacek and Derek Fisher as head coaches, like that was all because what Phil Jackson wanted was to preserve the legacy of the triangle offense. Like, you guys may not remember this, and I know I might be annoying because I'm a history guy, but there was a whole special on MSG. There was a 30-minute special on MSG about the triangle offense.
Yep.
That's how committed he was to the triangle.
His zenness could have helped Julius. Maybe there's some, yeah.
Yeah, no, seriously, like that. So to me, like I think that Isaiah, the reason why I'll give Isaiah a little bit more credit, he drafted David Lee. He drafted Nate Robinson for what Nate Robinson was.
Wilson Chandler, I think.
Wilson Chandler and Trevor Ariza. So I'll give him credit.
He took Ronaldo Balkman and Sweetney and some other dudes, remember?
All right, this is fight night. This is fight night.
Yeah, he was good. He was actually like the current drafting crew. He was good at finding diamonds later.
Yeah.
But he blew any lottery pick, I think. Yeah, it's easy to spot talent in David Lee at 30. I think
Yeah.
like you could have spotted some good things, but he spotted talent in Kristaps. Phil Jackson spotted talent in Kristaps Porzingis when not a lot of people did that. Remember remember how much Kristaps Porzingis was booed?
Oh yeah. But you want a hot take?
Yeah,
Here's a hot take.
spicy.
Oh yeah, this is a hot take. Um, so I actually recently rewatched the Kristaps Porzingis. Don't ask me why. The Kristaps Porzingis drafting the night he was drafted.
The draft? Okay.
Yeah, and you remember the kid who was crying?
Yeah. How
Could
could
there
I
have been
forget?
anything more staged than that? Like ever?
Yeah, he was like,
And literally, like he has his phone in front of him. He's like, "I'm gonna cry now." Really?
yeah,
Sorry,
he
it's
was.
just because I rewatched that no more than a week ago, and I was
That
like,
was the
yeah, that,
beginning of the internet clout,
yeah,
where you would go viral like the Bing Bong guy, and he was basically the Bing Bong guy before the Bing Bong guy. And then remember he grew up and he wasn't recognizable. He was on like courtside. The Knicks gave
yeah.
him tickets.
And for what?
Meanwhile, diehards like us sitting in the bleachers.
Die as well as to sit on the couch.
Oh man,
So like yeah, so that's a good point. Like so that's the hot take of the night. That's the bold take of the night. Is that the crying kid, Kristaps Porzingis? So he's the beginning of going viral,
yeah,
based on Knicks being a Knicks fan or so a quote unquote Knicks fan. Is he even
yeah.
still a Knicks fan? Do we even know?
Who knows? But switching it up to opponents, right? Who, at what moment of games and which opponents infuriated you to the point where you just wanted to jump out there and fight them?
We've had
Like
so many
for
good ones.
for me, like Michael Jordan, that competitiveness in like the respect was there, but I was so happy with John Starks just going at him because that's what made me really love the
Yeah.
Knicks so much. That we had this guy that yeah, there was a skill set difference, but he never backed down.
You know what? That's a question that really shows how long. Um, we have a hot chat going on right now. You know, throwbacks to St. Pascal. Shout out to you guys because if you're from New York
Yeah,
City, you know about St. Pascal in Queens Village. So shout out to you
yeah.
guys.
Shout out.
Um, but that's a question. Your question, CT, is really um, it shows how long you've been a Knicks fan
Yeah. Michael
because you.
Rappaport is a good one.
Yeah, we're not gonna.
Yeah,
Um, Chicago, like what really made me hate Chicago was not just Jordan, it was the Chicago fans. Because a lot of the Chicago fans became LA fans, became Miami fans. It's like the beginning of like the front running fans. So it was
yeah,
annoying not just to deal with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and them just being so disrespectful. I will never forget Scottie Pippen dunking over Patrick Ewing and
oh
just kind of
man,
like mean mugging him when Patrick fell to the ground.
yeah,
It was also like how obnoxious Chicago fans were. Um, so like the Chicago, there's obviously Indiana with Reggie Miller.
yeah,
To a lesser extent, there's Orlando with like young Shaq and Penny Hardaway. Um,
yeah,
Charlotte, Charlotte Hornets.
yeah.
Miami Heat. Like, you know what? That's my bold take. My bold take: the Miami Heat,
Miami Heat, man.
because it's gone through three generations
Yeah,
of like
it
hating the
is.
Heat.
Yeah. Whilst there's still no big rivalry, Spencer Dinwiddie with the Brooklyn, New Jersey Nets, right? There was that moment when I think they were the Kenny Atkinson Nets, right? He was trying
Yeah,
to clown the Knicks, saying, we're going to win the city, you know, and what hurt me was they were actually beating us in some of
yeah,
those games with Carmelo.
yeah,
I was ready to go to blows. Um,
yeah. But the Miami. Here's why I'm gonna definitely say Miami. You have Miami from um, the '90s, like the Alonzo Mourning Miami, literally getting into fights. Then you have the Miami from the LeBron era, where you have Amari pretty much breaking his hands, right?
Yeah.
Then you have Miami now and the heartbreak we just had in the playoffs. So it's like for many of us, if you're a Knicks fan of like a certain age, Miami has been a thorn in your side for all of your life. Whereas Chicago was great during Michael's time, but and it was hot for a minute with Derrick Rose. But the Derrick Rose Chicago Bulls didn't really bother me as much as the Michael Jordan one. But Miami, man, has always been just mm,
Yeah, I agree, man. The Heat, in terms of like the Reggie years with Indiana, was just specific to that year.
yeah,
Um, I've kind of outside of that, I've had pity on Indiana, but the Heat always there. The Chicago Bulls, like that's even to this day, with the way their front office operates, they're delusional. The Zach Levine thing,
yeah,
I'll always have something against the Chicago Bulls. Um, Trey Young, that was 1 year. He still annoys me,
yeah.
uh, but yeah, not as much as Jimmy Butler, Pat Riley, that kind of thing. As Knicks fandom growing up, I think that's where it really hurts the most. Pat Riley,
Oh yeah, yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah.
turning his back on us, right? The amount of Knick fans would love to get an earful into Pat Riley right now. That's that's never going to go away, man. I could be 80, 90 years old. That's going to be there, man. And even the Heat, right? Just beating us the past year, right? That was a throwback to back to then. It was worlds collide this past season with the Heat. A new generation. Um, do you feel a certain kind of way against Brooklyn, being you're from New York? It's not even a rivalry there, is it?
No, it's like and there's a lot of New York chat happening. There's a lot of New York talk happening right now in the chat. And
Or maybe, just to preface that, maybe when it first happened and that billboard went up, Deron Williams, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, blueprint for greatness. How
no,
did you feel at that time? Did you feel like, oh, we're in trouble?
no, because New York, like the Knicks have such a long history in New York City that it's those teams. It's like it's Brooklyn shooting up towards the
Yeah,
Knicks. Even though you know New Jersey had a nice little run with Kerry Kittles and Jason Kidd. They had a little bit of success with Jason Williams in the past and Drazen Petrovic. New Jersey didn't have the imprint on New York City basketball because first they were in Jersey for such a long time. And even like, throughout the 80s and the 90s, Jersey, even when it was a good team, there were always jokes about New Jersey because their facilities weren't up to par. It wasn't Madison Square Garden. So it was the Knicks plus Madison Square Garden. And so that was just something that was difficult. Even back in the day, like New Jersey Nets games were on Channel 9, like UPN, or like before it was UPN, it was just Channel 9. So it never had the gravitas of the New
yeah,
York Knicks. And so when it became Brooklyn, I have a lot of friends who are from Brooklyn and, they're proud of Brooklyn, but it's not the Knicks. It doesn't have the history. Um, and so I feel like Brooklyn would love for it to, and this is the other thing too. When Brooklyn has been good, the Knicks weren't always good they weren't good at the same time. They weren't great at the same time. And I think that's one
yeah,
of the key ingredients you need for it to be a rivalry. Miami and the Knicks, they were good often at the same time. So that's what made it a rivalry because there was a possibility that either team could win. It was either Ewing versus Mourning. It was Melo versus LeBron. Now it's, Jimmy Butler versus Jalen Brunson. And both teams have to be good. Brooklyn and the Knicks haven't been good at exactly the same time, so it's not really that much
Yeah,
of a rivalry in my book.
agree. Yeah, until it's late in the playoffs. But
Yeah.
hey, here's a bold take.
Hmm.
Here's a bold prediction. And I've heard talk about this coming up, but there's a world where the Brooklyn Nets relocate again, possibly back to New Jersey, who knows? But my bold prediction is that the Brooklyn Nets end up moving again.
Wow.
They're just not capturing. I just don't feel like the arena's empty usually in the regular season. It just I don't know. They lost the
That
KD. They lost the KD Kyrie thing. They were at the point where they had some of the biggest superstars in the league in their prime, a big three even, and that still wasn't enough. So is that, I don't know what's going to happen with Joe Tsai. It might take a new ownership to come in to say, hey, I want to relocate the team. But what do you think? Could you see could you see a world where Brooklyn relocate?
that would be crazy. That would be crazy, for a number of different reasons. Um,
Yeah,
and like this is like a very, very New York City um, point. A couple of points. Uh, First off, like first thing, if Brooklyn relocates, the reason why that would be crazy is because they would have had two big threes within the last
yeah,
10 to 15 years. And it just shows that, just getting three big popular names does not necessarily equate to championship possibilities. Number two, I was around when the Nets became, when New Jersey became the Brooklyn Nets. And
yeah,
on a personal level, not to get too political, but it would be really crazy if the Barclays became an arena where there isn't a professional team there. And
yeah.
the reason
I
why I
can
say
see.
that is because I was in that part of Brooklyn all the time when they were building and constructing the stadium. Um, People had
Yeah,
to move because of that.
yeah,
People were like they were relocated. Um, like there were popular businesses in Brooklyn that were forced to move because of the Barclays, because of the Barclays being put up. And one of the promises like local politicians made was that, oh, we're going to make jobs here. This is going to revitalize the neighborhood. So if the Nets moved, that would be crazy. That would be really crazy in terms of what it would do to the local business on Atlantic and Flatbush, and like how much disruption there was initially,
yeah.
um, in the local area. And one more reason why, too, really quickly, is I just recently had a chance to check out the New York Liberty, and I want to make my personal appeal here, guys. Let's support the New York Liberty. The Liberty are doing amazing
Mhm.
things this season, and if you're a basketball head, I don't care what gender it is. I don't care if it's man. I don't care if it's woman. Like, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Courtney Vandersloot, um, Jonquel Jones, they are playing amazing basketball right now. And I fell in love with the Liberty when they were first created in the mid 1990s. Um, and
Yeah,
but I was actually frustrated when, they moved from, Madison Square Garden and then moved to the Barclays. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is that if Brooklyn leaves, it would make me concerned about what happens to the Liberty because they found a home in Brooklyn. And, I would be very disappointed if something happened to the Liberty because, especially for giving women an opportunity to demonstrate that they can ball. Um, I would not want anything to happen to the Liberty. So yeah, so that's crazy. So yeah,
yeah. No,
sorry
you
for that
make
lecture.
no awesome points. I appreciate you going into depth because yeah, it would mean a lot of things. It would, cause a ripple effect. But I would ideally, love the arena to stay there. Maybe they could bring more professional teams there to play. Uh, maybe they could, with the Knicks being such a huge Knicks town, this probably never happened. But they could have Westchester games there. They could have, you know, use it more for practice, etc. But yeah, I think it would all be dependent on a new ownership. Um,
Yeah.
Joe Tsai doesn't seem to be. He's been through the ups and the downs and the controversies with the Kyrie tenure previously as well. I just don't feel like he's long term invested in that. Maybe a New York owner comes in, um, and I'm thinking ways down the line. Maybe not in the next 5, 10 years, but later down the line. It's just such a Knicks town, like you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
That's never going to change. And if the Knicks start winning, which we expect them to do even more coming up, it's just going to be new fans that are born today are going to start to take on the Knicks as well. And I just feel like what part of New York is the Brooklyn Nets ever going to capture? Even the original fans that jumped across, um, is it just going to be residents of Brooklyn that just rep their local area? I have a hard time understanding like who are the hardcore Nets fans? Are they the people originally from New Jersey as well, mixed in with the Knicks doubters? Is it a
Yeah.
kind of a melting pot?
That's a really, I mean, I think this is something we should definitely talk about in another show because um,
Yeah,
it's because it's so fascinating because like you can look at the question of why Brooklyn. I mean, Brooklyn is a dope place, and obviously, like
oh
if you're from
yeah,
New York City, everyone in New York City represents their borough. Like if you ever go to a concert, the easiest thing a DJ will do is they'll go through every single. So if you've been to a concert at the Garden, if you go to a local concert, the first thing people do is like, all right, what borough are you repping? And like they'll go through every song. Is Queens in the house? Is Brooklyn in the house? Is Manhattan in the house? Actually they go Staten Island first because usually Staten Island is the least. Sorry, no shade, but shade. But Brooklyn has a very vibrant history. Especially
yeah,
because as we celebrate the 50th year of hip hop, you can't talk about hip hop history. You can't talk about the culture without talking about Jay. You can't talk about Brooklyn without mentioning Jay. You can't talk about Brooklyn without mentioning Biggie. Juniors on Atlantic. Um, but was Brooklyn ever in a position to draw 19,000, 16 to 19,000 people 41 times a year for a basketball team that had most of its history in New Jersey? Um,
yeah,
I think that's definitely a topic we need to definitely explore more because there are some real world ramifications. And I didn't mean for it to get so serious so quickly, but like it just so happened I was at a game recently at the Liberty, and like it would really hurt me if something were to happen to the Liberty because we obviously know the biggest piece of business at the Barclays is the Nets, then the concerts, and then perhaps the Liberty. But that was a decision
yeah,
that was made, and a lot of politicians made promises. And right now Seattle isn't desperate. They're desperate for a team. Nashville is talking. They want a team. Las Vegas. Let's not forget Las Vegas. Basketball is the
yeah,
only sport right now not represented in baseball. I mean, basketball is the only sport not represented in Las Vegas as of now because pretty soon the Oakland A's in baseball will be going to Las Vegas. So
yeah.
you
I
know,
think Brooklyn's best chance is to build a team organically that connects with the fans. You know, the
yeah,
fans that are connected with the Knicks go back, in terms of our history. The Brooklyn Nets they tried the manufactured thing with Kevin Garnett, who will always be a T-Wolf and a Celtic. Paul Pierce will
yeah,
always be a Celtic.
yeah,
So I could see how the fans couldn't connect. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, those guys were never really invested in that area. They'd already won chips in Cleveland and Golden State. Um, Buzzer beater, salute, super chat. Yeah, didn't they make Jay-Z an owner to sell the idea that the Barclays Center was going to create jobs?
yeah, yeah. Listen, Buzzer, that I was actually around um, when the Barclays was being constructed, and I actually had a lot of conversations with local activists and local politicians. The reason why I'm speaking so passionately about this particular topic, even though this is a Knicks space, is because like I was very close. I wasn't in the epicenter, but I was very close to a lot of people who were
Yeah.
fighting the construction of the Barclays Center, and in part because there were so many people who had businesses in the area who were like, "What's going to happen to us?" And a lot of people were like, first off, the
Always. Yeah.
rents are going to skyrocket. We're going to not
Ooh.
be able to afford, living in this area. And the counter argument was always, well, it's going to improve the neighborhood. There'll be more job opportunities. And yeah, getting Jay to be attached to the project was part of it. And so this is why, we saw so much of Jay-Z within the first few years of the Barclays Center.
Yeah. He was the draw
Um,
for me. He was
he
the draw
was,
card.
he
Like, it
was.
wasn't the players on the court.
It was a lot about Jay. Like even like the creation of the iconography, the creation of the logos. It was very inspired by like Jay Z. But like
Yeah.
a lot of us have forgotten that. Like it's been a while since he's really been associated with the Barclays.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a
Yeah. So,
very complicated topic.
yeah, that's why, yeah, it's great to defend, passionate. We defend what we are passionate about on Knicks fight night. Um, yeah, I know we're going a little bit over than we planned, but yeah, is there anything else, any other things you wanna hit on?
Yeah, no, we need two more. We need, first off, salute to the chat. That you guys were really, really an amazing chat tonight. We got a lot of like throwback, people making connections to where they're from. We had a really healthy conversation about like, New York City history. I saw some of you guys shouting out bus
Yeah,
lines. So that hit me in a special way. I saw people like shouting out Q77.
yeah,
So like if you're New York, this was a really New York City heavy conversation, but at
yeah.
the
We
same
can bring
time,
this back.
oh yeah, yeah. That's what I was about to say. Like we have two conversations for future shows. Who was done more wrong? Was it Patrick or was it Carmelo? So that's going to be a future show. And then also, like I think we should definitely talk a little bit more about this Brooklyn situation because it does have an impact on New York City fans. And so yeah, this was really really dope. So I'm good. This was great.
Yeah, no, awesome, man. Appreciate you as always. The
Yeah.
chat, replay gang. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Like, subscribe. The streets are buzzing. Yeah, we're the lifeblood of the team, the fans, and yeah, the Brooklyn situation is going to be very interesting. It's a big borough, big area. Um, they've had a little bit of success, and I think they're kind of building back to where what suits them. Mikal Bridges, younger core. A lot of people wanted the Knicks to build that way, but the New York Knicks have the city. We're all about the Mecca, orange and blue all day, every day. Um, get ready for the fight tonight. Predictions: Knicks fight night. But if you're a fight fan, Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford. It's a generational boxing fight. So yeah, sit back, enjoy. I think the fans hopefully are the winners tonight. No robbery, no decision. Just the best man wins. I think I'd favor Terence Crawford at this stage, but yeah, anyone can win, man. Um, on that note, we'll get ready to wrap this thing up. We'll be back early next week. We've got more shows lined up, more guests. So yeah, have a blessed weekend. Have a great night. Enjoy the fight. CTEJ out.